I'll give you a quick Ric Flair story.
Oh, please.
So I think there was 5 or 6 of us that were being sent by WWE over to the Middle East. So we were going to go to Qatar and we're going to go to Djibouti, Africa. And it was just like an ambassadorship to sign autographs for the military at the military bases and whatnot. So there was me, Benoit, Shane Helms, Trish Stratus. I think Lita was there as well. And we were all flying from home. And I believe it was either Atlanta or Charlotte. I think maybe it was Charlotte. I can't, one of those 2 cities. We were all flying into from our homes. And then we were all going to get on the same plane and fly, I believe, to Rome and then Rome to Qatar, right? And so we all flew into Atlanta, and I remember sitting at the gate, and Benoit comes in, and Trish Stratus and Shane, they're all coming in there. And we're all sitting at the gate, but there's no Flair. And, we're just talking amongst each other. You guys ready for this tour? Blah, blah, blah. And then down the hallway of the airport, all we hear is, woo! And we all look up and go, is that Nate? And sure enough, as we're all looking down, we see this guy. I don't know how he got a dolly past security. He's got to know somebody in the airport. I don't know how this happened. But he's pulling his roller bag with one hand and pushing a dolly with the other hand. And it had 3 big boxes on this dolly. And we're all looking, going, what the heck is Nate doing? And he's walking right towards our gate. And as he comes up to our gate, he's like, all right, guys, we're ready for the trip. I need y'all to take one of these bottles of wine and stick it in any free space in your carry-ons you got. 3 boxes full of wine bottles on a dolly through security inside the airport. We were just like flabbergasted. So are you serious? You want us to unpack all these boxes, take the bottles and stick them in our bags? And he was like, we got to bring all this stuff with us. So we're pulling all these wine bottles out of the boxes, and I'm cramming my roller bag full and cramming my knapsack full. It's already got stuff in it. I can only fit a few here and there. So between all of us, we got all the bottles in all of our bags. Now our bags are like 1,000 pounds each. It's ridiculous. But at least we're at the gate. We just got to carry it from this seat onto the plane, and we're in the system at that point. We don't got to carry all this weight. Well, about 5 minutes before the doors were supposed to open, we have a gate change. And it's not just down the hall to the next gate. It's on the other side of the airport. By the time we all carry our roller bags and our knapsacks to the next gate, we're completely drenched in sweat. Just disgusting. And then we get on the plane. We fly to Rome, fly to Qatar. And the second we landed in Qatar, guess what customs did? Confiscated every bottle of wine we brought in there. And Nate was flipping out. I thought he was going to get us arrested in the Middle East. He was flipping out. They were taking his wine bottles. But he made us carry those wine bottles all the way to Qatar only to get them confiscated. Because you can't bring that stuff into Qatar, It's, oh, man. Friggin' Nate, I'll tell you.
I was going to say, like I just said, I've just come back from Turkey, right? And they had, in the airport, 3 separate bag checks. Like, not just 1, 3 separate ones. And that's like if there is one, a moderate Muslim country. And they were on it like nobody's business. They were swiping my iPad for looking for drugs, traces, just the whole bit.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And
that's intense.
I bought that iPad from a friend of mine as well. And I know for a fact he was chopping up something on it. You know what I'm saying? I was like, thank goodness I had the wherewithal to clean it properly first.
Yeah. You get some of that residue on there and they catch it, man. They can ham you up for a long, long time.
I recently saw on a down market YouTube interview channel that I consider down market to me, is you were talking about Ric Flair, and basically he was doing the Vince Russo handshake thing, or not handshaking on purpose. So was this just Ric Flair's deal with you, or elaborate, please?
I don't think he liked my uncle for some reason. I don't even care if he did or didn't, but I think that might have something to do with it, because he cut a promo one time and goes, I never liked you, I never liked your uncle. And I go, what the fuck you got to say that for? And it's because that's what he felt. He never liked my uncle and doesn't like me for some reason.
Well, I was actually going to ask about, so the Sheik, did he ever even wrestle Ric Flair? Or
no, my uncle barely knew who he was. When I had to tell him who Ric Flair was, he goes, "Which one is that?" I said, "He's the blind guy who's the world champion." He goes, "Oh, the fat guy?" I go, "No, the guy's in shape." Ric Flair. He
The
thought
fat
Chris
guy.
Benoit. Hey, check this out. He thought Chris Benoit was a big midget.
Did he?
I know that guy. He's Diamond Jim, the big midget.
What, did he have like short arms or something? And he just
Well, yeah. Chris Benoit has a big torso with short legs.
so like
That's
a
kind of
like scaled up.
yeah, a big midget.
So, for people who don't know, so the Ric Flair thing, how did that start manifesting, and what did he do?
I was in WCW, and I come in, I shake everybody's hand when I first get there. I come down in the middle of the dressing room, put my bag down, and start from the door around back to the door. No matter if I like you or not, I fake it. And he didn't fake it. My uncle says, you shake everybody's hand, even if you don't want to. Eat shit and shake everybody's hand. So when I'd get about 3 guys from Flair, he'd turn his back. So it wasn't a blatant turnaround. The next day was when I got Rick to him, he looked at me and turned around. It was a blatant turnaround. And I never put my hand out again.
Do you think this is sort of like an ECW thing? Because Ric Flair very much had problems with Mick Foley for years, and they both wrote stuff about each other in each other's books. Do you think that Ric Flair is just dismissive of basically people from ECW or people who use weapons?
Yeah, from what I hear, Ric Flair is very jealous, and so anybody who he doesn't approve of, he steps on.
Yeah,
and like we weren't buddies. He didn't bring me in. I didn't know him from before, and like I said, he had something against my uncle, and carried it on with me, which I don't mind. It's okay. I don't want to be his friend anyways.
Well, I don't think that many people want to be his friend at the moment. He seems to.
He's a sex offender.
Yeah, yeah. He every year goes by, he really does make it hard to enjoy him as a performer, doesn't he? With his out of the ring antics.
Yeah, when you heard what he did on that airplane, I'm shocked. I've heard, but I didn't really hear in that much detail. And plus, I don't listen to those stories that too much in detail because I know how they're exaggerated. But that story wasn't exaggerated even a little bit, and I'm offended by it.
He even made Mark Madden a babyface in real life somehow. So you must be a heel in real life.
Well, yeah, how you usually is. Back in the day, the baby faces were the biggest heels in real life. They were the biggest scumbags in real life, were the guys who were actually the good guys on TV.
Ric Flair recently revealed he was paid $300,000 for his last match. I don't suppose that would encourage you to re-explore.
Nope. And you know what? That's the Nature Boy. We're talking about a guy, when you say the man, and I love Becky Lynch. I think she's amazing. But from my time, there's one guy who's the man. His name's Ric Flair. And I was blown away. I was at a signing in Baltimore, and I had a ridiculously long line. Of course, it wasn't as long as Nature's because we were right next to each other. But then I even had a long line like that, and sitting next to Nate if I probably got all his overflow, But I love Nature Boy, man. Here's a great picture. When I went in the Hall of Fame, and me and Nature, there's been stuff that's been said, and all that shit went away 10 years ago or more, whenever it was, when I pulled him aside after remember when he did the big balloon drop in WWE?
No. What's the story there?
Well, it was when he retired, I don't remember what it was, 15 years ago, whatever it was. And they drop the balloons, and all the boys come out, and everybody's teared up, and Nate's just crying. And we didn't have heat together anymore at that point, but we didn't have any love either. And I thought, man, I love Ric Flair. I don't want to feel this way about him. I don't want him to feel this way about me. And when he walked in, we both had a signing that weekend. And when he walked in the door, he got hit by a million people, but eventually it was just me and him. He was like, "Hey, Diamond." I'm like, "Hey, Nate, you got a second?" He's like, "Sure." Walk off to the side. I said, "Listen, Rick, I know over the years me and you have had some heat together." He's like, "Oh, Diamond, don't worry about that." I go, "Rick, I'm not worried about it. Why don't you try and fix it, man?" I said, "I know I said some shit. You said some shit." I said, "I don't give a fuck." I said, "I don't know how it started, and I don't care. I'll tell you what I do care about." I said, "I would love to start all over again, man." I said, "I'm Diamond Dallas Page. I put my hand out, and he popped. He grabbed me, pulled me in. God bless you, blah, blah, blah. And over the years, we got closer and closer and closer. When I went in the Hall of Fame, the following Monday, I'd gone to get something to eat, and I was passing to go to the elevator. Diamond, hey, over there, went over, had a drink with Rick, and he was, how you getting home? He goes, you still living in Atlanta? I said, yeah. He said, what time's your flight? I go, 7:30. He goes, oh my God. He goes, who booked that? I go, not me. He goes, fuck that. He goes, there's a FedEx over there. He said, I go check your bags. He goes, I got the limousine, the Lear jets. I'm flying you home. You're a Hall of Famer now. I said, Nate, check out all those bags. He goes, send them over to FedEx. And this is a picture of me and him that next day getting on the Lear jet and flying back with Nature Boy. And Rick gets in the co-pilot seat. I'm like, Rick, what are you doing up there? He goes, I'm not taking off or landing, but I'm going to fly a little bit. I'm like, oh, fuck. It was a good flight, though. He just kept us on course. And when he found out it was my birthday, then he took me out to dinner and wine and dined me. And of course, sent me home in a limousine, like the Nature Boy, you know.
How could we not end on anyone else but Ric Flair? So just a funny Ric Flair story to finish the interview off on.
Oh my gosh. We were in Florida, and we were all at the bar, and I could see that it was one of those times where you just have to like tap out. I'm done. So I'd gone up to my room, and about an hour later, someone's knocking on the door. Doll, come out and play. Doll, come on. And so I look out the peephole, and it's Flair, and you can tell like it's blurred, but from the chest up, you can see like he's not wearing any clothes. He's out in the hallway naked. So I'm like, there ain't no way I'm opening up this door. So it's like really quiet, so you would never even know that I was in the room. And I used to would check in, like if I knew that I was going to maybe have problems at night, I would check in under Jamie Bond. It was kind of like my James Bond cohort, so they couldn't find me. Well, that night they found me. So I was just trying to be real quiet, like, well, they don't know I'm in my room. They don't know where I'm at. So I'm just be quiet. Well, then it got quiet all of a sudden. Well, then some more running up and down the hall. And then what had happened was Buddy Landell was on the same floor, and he saw Flair running up and down naked. So then he comes out of his room with his robe on, right as the police, the door for the elevator opens. And there's 4 policemen looking for a blonde man running up and down the hallways of the Holiday Inn. Well, there's Landell. Landell had not been out of his room for a minute. And here he opens up his door right as the elevator doors open up. So Landell got carted off. Flair never was part of it. And Landell got all the heat for being naked in the hallway.
What is it? When you got into the wrestling business, did you realize how many of the male wrestlers you would see naked in your career?
I never really saw that many, because I walk through the dressing rooms like this. I get my chair and I point it towards the wall. I just no, that's scares me.
Ric Flair, always a favourite of our news stories. His foul-mouthed rant on critics of his last match after winning, in quotation marks, Wrestling Observer Newsletter's most disgusting promotional tactic of 2022. Here is the quote he said, and I'm going to clean it up a little bit. You know what I got to say to that? I made $300,000. Go F yourselves. This is to the voters, apparently. That's right. I made $300,000 disgusting you. Disgust yourself for $300,000 and get in the shape that I got. How about that, mother effers?
Get in the shape he got. Damn, I would just take a fifth of liquor to get in the shape he was in. Is he talking about physical shape? He looked like hell. He looked like, and we've talked about this before. I thought he was going to die. I thought the guy was gonna die in the ring. And as far as making $300,000, I don't think he made that. What did the promoter make? Did he promote it himself, or did
This was the Conrad Thompson thing?
Conrad,
yeah.
But I'm sure that was a 50-50 deal, I guess. I'm sure, because you're not going to do it for nothing. And yeah, they drew a great house in the Nashville Civic Coliseum. It holds about 7,000 people. It's an old arena, but still a functioning arena. It still works. But I don't know if he made $300,000. But if he did, so what? I don't know.
Yeah,
I was disappointed, and he ripped the fans off. And even he planned, and I've said this before, the layout of the match was wrong. Why didn't they let his son-in-law do the sell part and Rick make the comeback instead of him going in there and trying to sell and then winning the match? And he was sweating like a Russian racehorse. And I've had people write me and said, I thought he was going to, seriously, people thought he was going to die. And I think he passed out a time or two in there. Doesn't even remember it. He doesn't even remember it. So Ric Flair now is trying to leave a legacy, and he should have left it alone or changed a lot of things in that match, because his legacy now is tarnished. I don't know. Ric Flair's full of shit. It always has been.
With Rick, I'll mention a couple of things here. Is one, he's all of a sudden turned into the thinnest skinned wrestler in the world. It's like no one can criticize him for anything, even when it's glaringly obvious. Like he's fallen out with... In fact, there was a video I put out there with Shane Douglas where he had to specifically address it, even though for the most part Shane was being very nice about him. But then he just buries Shane for, how dare he go out into the real world and get a job, manage, and a good job as well. But, he's got it in for Shane, and Shane has got it in for Rick. And the other thing is, as you picked up on there, Ric Flair's shape. I got into the shape I was in. My dad is 5 years older, and I swear he can run. He can still run. He's 78. He can climb. He's in good shape. Ric Flair was like, as you said, like, what awful. I can't even finish a sentence about how bad of a shape he turned up in. And also, do you think he went in there knowing that he was going to rip the fans off performance-wise?
No, I don't think he went in there knowing that. I don't think he thinks that far ahead. I think he thinks immediate future, and let's go do this match and let's get out of it. And I don't know. It was just an awful performance. They say never meet your heroes because it's going to be disappointed. You'll be disappointed. But a lot of them got exposed to Rick. And I think if they had another match that he said, this is my last one, I don't think he'd do a fourth as good as this one would do. Unless they just had one hell of an undercard. And people want to see that instead of seeing Flair. What would have really been bad if him and Steamboat had done it?
Ooh, singles match.
Can you imagine Rick trying to pull the whole load? He couldn't have gone 5 minutes. And they said he was drunk when he went in there. To me, that's totally, totally disrespectful to the people that made him, to the fans that made Ric Flair, for him to go in there and disrespect them. And as for his comment, F you, to all the people who knocked the match or whatever he was mad about, the fans should be saying it to him. Screw you, Flair. And the tickets weren't cheap for that match either. I don't know what the ringside was. I think it's like $50 or $100. That's a pretty expensive ticket for just a big independent show. Even Ric Flair was on it. But I would never, ever say F you to the fans who knocked me for a legitimate reason. At least I have sense enough to know that I can't go in the ring and have a match. I wouldn't even, you couldn't melt and pour me into a ring. I mean, you just could melt me and put me in a cup and just pour me into the ring, because I would refuse to do it. And one thing is, I know I have a bad knee now and a limp and everything else. But even if I didn't have that, I couldn't go in there and do it because I would blow up. And blow up means run out of steam, run out of air. And Rick was blowed about 30 seconds in. You could see him already sucking wind. And he's already had a heart attack. That's why people thought that he was going to die. I'm glad he didn't. I'm pretty sure that he's glad he didn't too. But it was really a slap in the fan's face to pay all that money to see him in that condition that he was in. Plus, he got drunk, and I don't know what. He said he was sick, and he made all kind of excuses. Rick, you're just too old to do it. And you can't, damn sure. He may have done it before when he was halfway drunk, I guess. I mean, I don't think I could do it, even back when I was starting out. If I got hammered to go into to a ring, I couldn't perform. It would just be, I don't know, it'd be a mess. But not the mess that Ric Flair ended up with.
Yeah, I mean, he went in, he knew he was injured, he probably may have been able to do something several months beforehand, but he knew before the match he was injured, and then he got drunk as well. So, I mean, the most talented wrestler you were ever in the ring with?
I will say Nick Bockwinkel, and a close second would be Bobby Orton Jr., and another close third would be Rick Steamboat. Another one who I never worked with, but I would have loved to, would be Jake Roberts. He was incredible in the ring. And then somewhere down the line, Ric Flair. The Nature Boy.
How far down the line is Ric Flair here? Or
you know, Rick was so, you know, he was wrestling. I mean, he every bit of his life was geared about, you know, what he was going to do and how he lived, and he fit perfectly into the wrestling profession. And, you know, he was great. And it's funny because I did you ever see the 30-30 on him?
I saw the 30-30. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I watched all that happen. I watched him live that all out. And I remember Greg and I went to the opening here when they had it in Minneapolis, and they asked me a question after the show. And I said, you know what? I said, if Rick would have had to do it all over again, he wouldn't have changed a thing. You know, he would have gone through the marriages and you know, whatever else because that's Rick.
With Rick, I might as well mention Rick a bit then.
Sure.
You was he in the camp the year after you were?
Nope, he was in our camp.
Yeah.
300 pounds he weighed.
Well, I was going to ask that, actually. Was he still in the Dusty Rhodes, I want to be the second coming of Dusty Rhodes mode at that point?
I think so. Yeah, he was, and you know, he was so far ahead of us because he was born to be a wrestler. I mean, everything he did, and he was so far advanced, and you know, he could do interviews, and he knew how to work, and he knew how to get heat, and he knew how to, you know, give a good comeback to a baby face. He, you know, and I did 3 1-hour draws with him, and it was, you know, it was tiring. You know, it was up and down for a long time.
With his cardio, that's one of the most famous things that's said about Ric Flair. Is it as true as it was back then as it probably was in the 90s, that he was always on the stepper, he never went to bed, and he always seemed to have energy?
Yeah, he did. He could do that Stairmaster at, you know, level 10 for an hour, you know, and he was in great shape. And then Rick was funny because when we go to the bars, you know, he was the life of the party, but he'd order a drink and then he'd have a couple sips and put it down, and then he'd go to someplace else and order another round and then have a couple sips and put it down, and then he'd go someplace else, and then people would say, Jesus God, he's got to be drunk. But he only had a sip. He out of the 10 drinks he ordered, he probably only had two. And that's the way he was.
Did I can't remember what else I was going to ask about Rick. It was good. Oh, that was it. It was when did Richard Flair become Ric Flair, do you think?
The minute he went into the Mid-Atlantic in Charlotte in 1973 or four, I think it was 74.
What was the event then that changed it?
I just think he changed it to Ric Flair. It had the name right there, and Flair, you know, I thought and then it was the Nature Boy, you know, from Buddy Rogers, and the big $10,000 robes he'd wear, and just his deal. You know, he was quite the personality.
I teed you up with this, the low-hanging fruit section, a few Ric Flair questions. Now, this is our third interview. I think I've asked one Ric Flair question, all of them, so I've banked a few of them up now, so I'm not sort of like a bludgeoning you with the subject that everyone wants to hear from you about. But this is something I genuinely don't know. And I'm Not Booked Terry, which is a great reference. Could you please explain the beef between himself and Ric Flair? I've been curious as to how it all got started, and I can't seem to find a definitive answer. And I don't know the definitive answer anyway. Is it just when you went to WCW, he was Booker, you didn't get on, or what was it specifically?
Yeah, I'm surprised because this is sort of like the Mark Madden story I wasn't aware of earlier. I'm surprised that somebody like you's not aware of this, because I've said this so many times. But
well,
yes,
I've got my ideas and everything, but I don't know if there's like one specific instance where you thought, okay, you've sort of gone past the point now.
Yeah, when you're that stage of your career, that neophyte stage of your career, you know, when you leave your wrestling school, in my case, Dominic Taducci's, you know how to do the arm drags and the body slams and the suplexes. You have no clue of how to put them together. It's just, you know, these sort of general things. And now, do I speed up here? Do I slow down? It's all Greek initially. When I first went there, once I could see the NWA in Pittsburgh, which was around 78. I had grown up with WWF things. That's all we pretty much got in Pittsburgh. Excuse me. Now with the advent of cable, I see I can turn it on and watch it, and I'm mesmerized. Right, having had an amateur wrestling background, the WWF, like the old stuff in WWF, sort of looked like what I thought wrestling would if it went pro. But then I see this NWA stuff, and I see Harley Race, and I see Don Canoodle and Sergeant Slaughter, and I see Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, and I see Flair, and I am magnetized to it. It's wow, this is like a complete different level of professional wrestling. And actually, I was still dabbling in watching WWF, but I was watching the NWA pretty much, and UWF exclusively. When I got there, you know, I let these guys know, Harley and all those guys that I just mentioned. Sergeant and Canoodle were gone by then, but like a life-changing, as far as my wrestling fan eyes, how life-changing this was. Like, this took me just to a completely different place. And Flair specifically, I told, like, you know, he was like a huge inspiration to me. And I was trying to do it in a way not to sound like a sycophant or like a creepy guy. I was like, dude, like, your work's incredible, you know. And well, he loved that, right? You know, tell me more. And but again, as a kid at that stage of your career, you don't know exactly what to do, how to fix it if it goes wrong. And so I said to him, and I prefaced it, I remember specifically saying, I know you're busy, and if you don't have time, I totally understand. But if you ever watch one of my matches and give me some feedback, I would really appreciate it. I'd really love that. You know, I just want to learn. And I said at the end again, but if you're too busy, I totally understand. He put his hand on this shoulder and said, it would be an honor, sir. Okay, great, cool. Flair's going to give me some feedback. And over the next several weeks, I started getting very generic feedback. Good selling, good bumps, good comeback. Like, never, hey, the arm drag was in the wrong place. This move looks sort of weak. You turned your back to the camera. There was never anything specific like that. So back then, when I still had knees, I would have the heel beat me in the corner, turnbuckle me, and I would vault to the top rope and do a blind cross body. And on that night, I specifically did not do it intentionally. And I came back, and I'm not as dumb as people think I am. I can count to 20 if I can take my shoes off. And I'm telling myself in my head, please don't let this be what I'm thinking it is. And I came back and I went up to him and I said, how was it? He said, oh, it was great. And it starts the same generic stuff. And I said, well, how was the crossbody? And he went like he was thinking. And honest to God, in my head, I'm saying, please say you didn't see one. Please say you didn't see one. And after what seemed to be several seconds, he went, perfect, better than Steamboat. And when he said that, he literally went like zip, zip, like this, zinced up to this little tiny thing. And I always tell people today, incredible in-ring performer and fails miserably as a man. To me, if somebody comes up and says that to me, and I'm very cautious of this because I've told that story. When a young guy comes up to me or a girl and says, hey, we watch my match. If I have the time to do it, I will. And if I do, I give them the feedback. And I tell people I don't sugarcoat stuff because it never was to me. And that's how you learn. You can come back and I can say, hey, James had a great match. Man, everything was perfect. You were fantastic. You're a star. And if you know that you didn't have a great match, you just came back, but you may not know specifically what you did right or wrong. Then it takes a seasoned eye to say, well, okay, at this point you did this or that. And my experience is most kids really value that like I would have valued it. And I honestly did not want that to be the case. I wanted Flair to be the guy I had in my head. And, we hear this phrase all the time, like, don't meet your heroes. I understand the adage, but I've met a lot of my heroes. Bruno Sammartino, he was larger than I thought, like larger in stature. Just an incredible man. Dominic, Steamboat, so many guys, that did live up to what I had hoped for. And, look, I know Rick has a lot of things going on in his life, and I try, honestly, as I get older, I try very hard to give that space to, we all screw up as human beings, right? And it just seems like with him, it just keeps going on and on and on. We're 30 years, give or take, past that time. I've long since put that behind. In fact, the first night I worked with Chris, or the first week or two I worked with Chris, we were at a show that Flair was going to be at that was literally 2 weeks after his son had died. And personal difference with anybody else, my God, that's the worst thing in the world. And Chris was quite nervous, as big as he is. He's going to be in trouble. I said, look, dude, here's what's going to happen. I said, when I walk up to him, he'll be as nice as can be. He'll call me sir. And as we're walking away, he'll be burying me, but that's Rick, right? So we walk over, and Chris is straggling up behind me. And I got about 10 feet from her. So I put my hands up like this. I went, Rick, I said, he looked at me and goes, yeah, franchise. I said, Rick, I said, our differences aside, I said, I'm heartbroken for you, dude. I am so sorry. And he went, oh yeah. Hey, thanks, franchise. And I walked away thinking, I said, hey, sorry you lost your boots. It was strange to me. And again, I'm not saying he should have wore his heart on the sleeve like that. God forbid anything ever happened to my kids. I doubt that in 2 weeks I'd be making any appearances. Probably you'd never see me again. It just odd. And I don't mean odd in a good way or a bad way, just not what I would have expected in that moment. So yeah, I still say to this day, obviously one of the, if not the greatest in-ring performer our industry's ever seen, but that giant to comparison as a man, and he slops off precipitously.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions on this sort of theme. Now, I might say this wrong, but do you, in the last few years, Ric Flair has not done himself any favours? He's divorced his fifth wife because he wanted to continue. I believe it was because he wanted to continue on drinking and partying and being Ric Flair, and I'm sure his wife just had enough of it, especially with all the health concerns he had. The dark side of the ring, allegations, other things like that. Is it the kind of thing where you, I don't know, maybe get a sense of schadenfreude or something like that, where you think, hey, I've been saying this for decades, at least more people are agreeing with you now?
Yeah. Well, surprisingly enough, from the time that it started, not long after, several people, many close to him, would say to me, I get it. I know I've known him for 20 years. I think Rick carries a lot of baggage and tries to anesthetize himself with that, self-medicate. When he was put in a medically induced coma, I wrestled with the idea of, should I go public and say anything? Because somebody out there is going to think I'm piling on, not being sincere or whatever. And I hope the fans out there know with me, if I go out of my way to say something to or about somebody, it's because I feel the compulsion to do so. It's not, I don't think in terms of agendas. And I went on Twitter and I posted out, I'm praying for the nature boy, and we've seen enough people, our business die, that kind of thing. And he luckily came out of it. Now, because of my medical school background, I'm pretty well aware of how dire that is. You get put into a medically induced coma to save your life. The odds are heavily against you of living long after that.
5 to 10%, I believe he was given, of actually getting out then.
Yeah, it's small. Put it this way: it's the odds that you wouldn't take if it was offered to you for a bunch of money. But when he came out, he seemed to have turned over a new leaf and stayed sober for a while, and and seemed to be doing well. And he, by all appearances, seemed happy to me at that time. And not long after that, there was a big time wrestling out of Boston show down near Pittsburgh in the Ross Draver Ice Gardens. And my nephew-in-law had driven me down. So Flair was there, got paid a ton of money. He went out in the very first segment, did like a 3-minute promo, and then he needed my nephew to drive him back to the airport. So my nephew left. This is the top of the show. I'm on late in the show. Like an hour after the show's over, my nephew still hasn't come back, and we're like an hour from the airport. He ended up finally coming back like an hour and a half, 2 hours after the show had ended. And he apologized. He said, we weren't a mile down the road and Rick made me pull into a bar. And he said he stopped at every bar going to the airport. And I went, well, obviously means he's drinking again, right? And like, that's one of those things, like, again, if you survive this medically induced coma, straighten up. Because you got a bad thing coming to you. My take now is, for what it's worth, again, trying to play a psychoanalyst, is I don't think Ric Flair, first of all, Richard Flair no longer exists. He's allowed Ric Flair to take over that body. And there's a real danger to that, because that is truly a mental illness, right? Like, we are playing a role. I'm very keenly aware of the differences of Shane Douglas and Troy Martin, and I hope they're very different people. But like the last match thing, full disclosure, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did watch clips of it. And, close friends of mine kept asking me, why is he doing this? Why is he doing this? Because let's face it, he's one of those guys who, you get this question all the time, who's on your Mount Rushmore? You got to put Flair there, right? I mean, you can't say the greatest worker in the industry and not be on the his legacy is solid. 100 years from now, wrestling fans will be talking about and studying Ric Flair's work. So I found it odd, like, what could you possibly do in that ring that would not detract from that? Because let's face it, none of us can today do what we did 30 years ago, unfortunately. So why do it? And my take on it is, I think that Ric Flair now thinks the only ending to that book is you got to die in the ring, right? I mean, you can't die in a hotel room someplace. That's so normal. The oddity of that is that right there in the front row are your kids and grandkids and your coworkers that you admire. And then, we're hearing these stories, if true, that he blacked out twice or something in the match. Like, those are major, major danger spots, right? For somebody that's in his condition, pacemaker and the coma and everything. I wish for Rick, and at this time of the year, Christmas, my Christmas wish for Ric Flair, Richard Flair, is that he can find whatever peace he's searching for and live out the rest of his life. That's 50 more years, happy and able to look at his grandkids and see just the wonder there in his kids and marvel. And I marvel looking at my boys and thinking, how did this idiot make these guys like that? This is like way above my pay grade. And I honestly do, from every fiber of my being, I wish that for Rick. His legacy is secure. And, now as a man, because we're all men before we're human beings before we're wrestlers, I hope he finds whatever it is he's looking for, in peace.
Let's get right into the meat of Jim Crockett Promotions then, and Ric Flair. And obviously, one of the most famous things you're a part of, with a litany of 60-minute time limit draws with Rick, and put you on the map further. Before we talk about those, though, did you see Ric Flair's last match? Or last match?
No, I didn't see it. I was there, and I was there for the weekend, but I headed out before that evening's match, and I've only seen just a couple of little clips of it. Saw one of him bleeding and one of him leaving the ring, and I didn't see any of the match. I really didn't want to see it.
I understand you. Did you party with Ric Flair and Kid Rock afterwards?
Did I? No.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No, I missed out on that one.
No, never mind then. Well, we'll talk about Ric Flair then. Is just Ric Flair the easiest person in the world to have a 60-minute match with?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with him enough to where I knew, basically what he would do in the ring, and he had worked with me enough to where he knew what I would do. We would never call any spots or anything. All those matches we had were just cold right in there, and it was just our training and ability that we did that on. We didn't plan out any of the spots or anything before, and even the finish, we left those open too sometimes. As to how we would do it.
I don't understand why. I mean, I do understand why, but some people use that as a knock against Rick, that he always has the same match. But it's like, he always has the same match, and he's sold out arenas for 25 years with it, so, or probably longer, in fact. So, I mean, that should be a testament to him, surely.
Well, it's not that he always has the same match. It's just that some of the bumps that he incorporates in, the flip in the corner and the fall on your head spot, it's just typical Ric Flair stuff, and if he doesn't do it, you wonder what's going on. So there's two sides to that story.
How many matches do you think you wrestled Ric Flair in? And if you can pick one, do you have a favorite?
I'm sure I wrestled Rick at least a couple of hundred times. Probably, I mean, at least, I would say probably 200 or 300 times I wrestled Rick. And, he was always really good in the ring. It was just always easy.
Any specific match that stands out? Or if you've had so many, do they all blend in together?
Not any one in particular. I mean, people always bring up the one, that we did on the worldwide hour Broadway on TV. But I don't even think that was actually an hour. I think it was like 48 or 50 minutes or maybe 55. But, in the towns where we did it, we went hours. And it was, I guess, I was asked to do those with Rick because they knew that I could do it. There's a lot of guys that couldn't, and they didn't.
The Great American Bash, and sort of memorable for the wrong reasons. And I remember actually seeing a video of it after the fact, and I just remember thinking, poor Barry, because it wasn't your fault, it wasn't Lex Luger's fault. The fans wanted Flair, and they chanted, "We want Flair," all the way through. How did you deal with those chants, and what would you have done differently in that event?
Well, I mean, I never let any of the chants or anything like that bother me anyway. I always, conducted my business and had a match, and, always stayed right to it. Unless there was a spot or something where you were trying to sell to what they were doing, you would do that. But I never really let it bother me in the ring, any of the chants or anything.
Yeah. With wrestling Lex Luger, and off the top of my head, I think Lex Luger aligns with Harley Race, and the fans boo even more. I mean, would you have? I'm presuming, looking back, you would have had you win and send the fans home happier, at least, than that.
Well, that's what it was originally planned, but because Rick left, and we needed to put the title on a heel, and they needed to elevate somebody up to Rick's status, and it was just a stepping stone for Luger. And I understood that. I understood business. I always did. and it was not a problem for me to do that.
Was it you that never got to wrestle Flair, Don, or was it Jerry Lawler that you never wrestled? I can never remember which one it was.
Flair.
You never wrestled Flair.
You never wrestled.
When he was breaking in, when he was a big fat guy.
Yeah, he was big and fat.
When they're out at the ranch, out at the barn there, and he was just in some spot show out around St. Paul somewhere, and he was he was in love. He was crazy for Dusty and Murdoch, and he was picking him up, taking him to the airport. You know, he was around, and he wanted the worst way to be a heel. So I went out there. You know, I was like 220, 215, 20 pounds. And he was like 300 pounds. So I laid back. I let him heal. I came back after the match. I caught hell from Wally Carbo for
For selling him.
Yeah, for letting him heal for a while. Oh God.
Yeah. So first time I ever wrestled Rick was in San Antonio, and I was just a young kid. So 1973. Ray Stevens and somebody else brought him down from Minneapolis, and he worked with me. I didn't even know it was Ric Flair. I mean, and years later, when me and Rick were tagged up, he told me the story where I wrestled him in 1973 and didn't even know who he was because he looked like Curly Joe. He's all fat, you know, and bald-headed. His head was shaved. Looked just like Curly Joe.
Yeah.
Did either of you watch his last match ever? You two are basically the same age as Rick.
No, so I watched some of it on YouTube. It was just bits and pieces of it. It was terrible. And he said that he was all dehydrated, and but he, you know, if you're gonna wrestle, don't wrestle with a damn t-shirt on. Just go out there and let your skin hang out. That's why he couldn't breathe. I mean, you ever try to wrestle with a t-shirt on? You know, you can't do it. So show your baggy tits and whatever, you know, I mean, just show it. I'm never going to wrestle again, but if I did, I wouldn't do it with a t-shirt on.
Best favorite WrestleMania moment, was it that one or was it one of the other ones?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, like your favorite this and that. I don't know. Wrestling for me has always been a job more than anything. So that's what's your favorite? I don't know. Just, you know, it was like, you're here today, you got to do this and that. But if I had to pick, it was probably, even though it got cut from the main show, which sucked for us, especially the payday. But was when I tagged with my brother against Miz and Morrison at WrestleMania. What was it, 25, 24? Who knows? One of those, yeah, one of those. It's not rack our brains, but yeah, one of those. So that was kind of cool. You know, it's just a cool thing for. I can see like young brothers growing up. You know, what I mean, one of their dreams would probably be, wrestling on the bed or something. Thinking, one day, we could be tag champs. So that's probably my favorite WrestleMania moment for me.
Really famous backstage promo where Ric Flair gives you the beans. It was sort of a directive from the office to, I don't know, maybe G himself up or G you up or whatever. It's really famous backstage sort of promo cut on you. But the question I was going to ask was, it actually led to you and Ric Flair teaming together. Was that just like super cool, or how could it not be?
Yeah, it was cool to to tag and wrestle somebody that your dad wrestled with back in the day. And of course it's the Nature Boy, and I've always gotten along with him. He's always treated me great, so it was fun, to be able to tag up with the Nature Boy.
Yeah. Do you remember any parties you went to with him? Could he still go at that point?
Yeah. He could still go. He could still really still go. Yeah. He's another guy that would be the last guy at the bar. He was still the Nature Boy then.
Oh, bugger, I've messed up a camera thing. It doesn't matter. I'm directing myself here, so I've got a finger going every single time you speak, and I just had it on me then. Doesn't matter. What else I was going to ask you was, you were bumped from one of the WrestleManias, weren't you? And I remember
at the time.
bumped
from two.
Yeah.
Two WrestleManias. It happened twice, yeah.
Yeah. I remember actually reading at the time you were pretty vocal about being bumped. What sort of led to that? Do you remember?
I think it was when the internet was first coming out or whatever. And yeah, I don't know. I was just doing my heel stuff. I didn't know it'd take on a life of its own like that. I was just being a heel, but people took it as like a shoot type of thing. But but at that point, I already have to own it. So all right, I guess now it's that. So what are you gonna do? But yeah, but I didn't. I just I was just trying to get some heel heat, but it turned into like people thought I was for weird with it. Oh, so I kind of that's kind of I guess the beginning where my heat backstage started developing from.
I remember. Well, actually, just from earlier in this interview, that you said that you actually got like a pay cut because you were bumped to the pre-show. Was that the same for the Ric Flair thing as well?
That's what happens when you get off the pay-per-view to the pre-whatever. That's why guys are mostly mad. They're mad, because they're not on the main show, but also the pay cut is drastic.
Really? I mean, I won't ask you for the exact number, but like what percentage?
A lot of percentage.
Right, okay. And also, I've got to ask you, you've got to give us a crazy Ric Flair story. I don't know if there were too many going around in sort of the mid-late 2000s, but is there anything he just did that was just super funny and out of, what anyone else would do?
I don't know. I don't know if we can tell those stories now. Like the only one I have, but you can't really tell those stories nowadays because it's seen as, the times have changed. So it's, it's different to hear. It was different to hear it nowadays than from back then. But, just mainly the stories, mainly just him always, always picking up the tab, always, and everybody order, you always say, put it on the H. And, it's still to this day he's like that. I drank with him after the Rumble. I think we went drinking, the same thing. But this time when I realized he's not the nature boy anymore because he cut out early. He said, no, that's it for me. I gotta start taking things a little lighter. All right, man. I can respect that.
Did he ever do like the buy a tray of shots for everybody, and then when it time to do it, he did the old behind the shoulder deal?
No, it wasn't that wild. It was a little easier. Just I think he was just drinking beer. I think, and I think we were just drinking beers.
First time you saw Ric Flair naked?
The first time I saw him naked, I really, but I'm glad you asked this question because you've got to understand this. My partner, Robert Gibson, okay. The difference between me and him is I walk up and put it in, and Robert walks up. Well, he puts it in and walks up. So needless to say, I was used to that. Robert, somebody asked me one time, he says, how come Robert walks around the room naked? And I said, dude, if I had a dick like it, I'd wrestle naked. I'm not shouldn't. So understand me, it wasn't a big surprise, but in our business years ago, believe it or not, our business used to be really, really sacred, really, really sacred, especially the dressing rooms. We hardly ever dressed because with the heels, we were kayfabe. The heels were on one side and we was always on the other side. But I know on the babyface side, this dressing room is sacred. Do you hear me? Mm-hmm. Sacred. So normally it didn't bother me any because normally when you come into the dressing room, because you didn't go out and sign autographs, you didn't have, the autograph sessions, and you didn't get to sell your own gimmicks. So everybody was in the dressing room, and that's what they would do, especially Dusty. Dusty would walk in. First thing he'd do is take all his clothes off and leave his cowboy boots on. And the reason why, it was our place. You could do that. You understand me? Mm-hmm. It's just the way it was. I did too. I sit over in my chair, maybe put my under tights on, just sat there and read the paper or play some cards because we didn't go out into that. But understanding to see Ric Flair naked, I've seen several people like that. Robert Fuller.
Robert Fuller will be coming up, so to speak. He will be coming up in a minute. I should really qualify the question. The first time you saw Ric Flair naked in a bar?
No, okay. Now I seen Ric Flair naked on airplanes. I did that. But see, you talking about the first time, so you just click something off in my brain. Oh yes, man. We went to we were flying to Los Angeles somewhere, and we're drinking, and Rick gets up and goes to the very back in the bathroom, and he comes out with his wrestling robe on, struts all the way up the aisle, and then when he gets up there in the front, he's naked up under it. Rick get to drinking. It's like tequila makes your clothes fall off. It's his clothes aren't. I'm glad you reminded me of that. That's what you bet on this question. So, oh no, Rick, he get naked anywhere. What the hell? It was just a normal thing for him. Okay.
Good for him. The next one, the last man standing at the bar.
Rick. Oh yeah. So but I kind of I believe I smartened up to him, but I'm not for sure. Because he used to serve kamikazes. I mean, it's every 5 minutes, kamikaze. And I think sometimes that his was water. Because you can't be human. It don't matter what. We'd stay out all night. Get into the motel at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I would get up to pee or something. You look out the window out by the pool. Ric Flair would be out there doing squats. Hundreds of them, and he's the one that really taught me. I'm sorry, dude.
So that's Vince McMahon back again. Vince McMahon's calling again.
Yeah, I told him I couldn't make Monday night. Man, leave me alone. But I think he'd put water in his shots. But he's the one that taught me, and I told you earlier about giving the people the money's worth. And I know you didn't ask me this question, but I'm going to answer it because we're on the subject of it. He, Ric Flair's one that taught me about giving the people their money's worth. I don't know if you ever did you ever see Rick wrestle live?
3 times, yeah. 2004, 5, and 6, they Raw came over here once a year.
Okay. But you notice one thing about Rick, when he went to the ring, if he didn't go an hour time limit, his match went 45 to an hour. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it went 45 to an hour. And he's the one that always taught me that. You got to give the people, I'm the world champion. And you have to give the people their money's worth. When they pay to see me, I make sure they get their money's worth. He didn't go 5 minutes. He didn't go 10 minutes. He went to the ring and he gave you everything that he had. And buddy, let me tell you, if you're in the ring with him, you better give him everything you got. If you don't, he'll eat your ass up. You see what I'm saying? To beat a man, you got to beat the man. Okay.
The famous match, WTBS, November 12th, 1988, is probably the story you've told more than any other, but I have to know from the horse's mouth, as it were, why you and Ric Flair went out and he made you Ricky Steamboat for the day.
Yeah. Well, James, and I'll take you back to that time where the TV matches actually went a distance. There was actually time put in. And what a lot of fans don't realize is the dressing rooms were not together back then. In other words, all of us underneath guys would dress in one room. And of course, Rick, the top guys would dress. And we're talking TBS studios. Atlanta, Georgia. And the thing about Ric Flair, he was always so well dressed and just so well groomed. And one thing about early morning TBS tapings is Rick didn't like to work them because he always had a flight right after that, and he had to make a town that night. So you can imagine getting sweaty and all that morning, and then having to jump in on a plane and make the town. Well, Dusty would always kind of, not really pull a rib on him, but just kind of stick it to him every now and then and say, Rick, you're working today. It was not Ric Flair's favorite thing to do. He loved doing the promos, and he was one of the few that could draw money by just talking. But that particular morning, I remember it just like it was yesterday. He told Rick, you're working today. And Rick just said, well, if I've got to, give me George South. And I didn't know any of this was going on. So 2 seconds before we go through the curtain, Rick looks over and he says, today, you're going to be Ricky Steamboat. Now, for me, who had just driven all night from Charlotte, North Carolina to Atlanta, 5 hours away, and of course, the tapings were, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning in that cold studio. They kept those studios, James, so freezing because the cameras would shut down. So here it is, early in the morning. I'm getting ready to go through the curtain. I know that I'm wrestling Ric Flair. And then he tells me the only thing he said was, you're a Ricky Steamboat. And we went out there, James. And as you look back now, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was just listening. And I don't think I have ever been so blowed up in my life. What was amazing is Jackie Crockett, the cameraman, he told us we were going to a commercial. So I'm thinking, good, finally Rick will calm down and he'll grab a hold and we'll go to the commercial. Well, buddy, we went to the commercial and he didn't stop. So even during the commercial breaks, Rick is going, and you would have thought that I thought I was going to win the NWA World Belt. It was just, JJ jumped up on the apron. I think I slammed Flair off the top rope, and we knocked the lights down, and you can see when the match was over, Teddy Long was one of the referees back then. They literally had to, and it's a proud moment, they had to drag me back to the dressing room. But you know what's amazing? Even today, James, I can go to shows and wrestling fans will come up and they still talk about that match. Now, I've wrestled him several other times, many times, but buddy, it's that one. Man, they can tell you the color of trunks I had on. They can tell you, what Ric Flair wore. And you think that was so many years ago, but to be a part of, these people's lives, all those years. And I came that close, James. I came that close to being NWA champ, but that was it. I think Flair just said, well, I'll show you, Dusty. And if you watch that match, I bet 95% of the match, I just beat Ric Flair up. I slammed him off the top. He was having me try to press slam. It was just amazing. And as I watch it now, Lord, I should have slowed down. Everybody said, why was I running so fast in that match? I was just afraid Rick would change his mind, and not let me do the move. So just that's one of my special times.
Can I ask you then? So the match goes through a commercial break. How long was the match actually? Because I think it maybe only 8-9 minutes on video. Right.
It was all right at 14 minutes. And you think a TV match back then with an unknown, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. But they gave Flair time to work. And it was amazing because, and Black Bart was that way with me. For some reason, I was just very blessed. I would go out there with Black Bart and those guys would let me. Dusty used to get so mad because I would just beat these guys up and they trusted me. And then but they always believed, and Rick believed this, that if the fans thought this was a competition, if they thought this was a match, then they would really, tune in. And he was right. People still remember it all these years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick has sung your praises for decades, publicly and I'm sure privately as well. Were you ever close friends with Rick outside the ring, or was this purely a professional mutual appreciation sort of thing?
No, I love him. And on a personal side, when his mother passed away, I was able to go, when I was able and blessed to train his young son, Reed, his son, Reed, when Reed first got into business. And I tell people jokingly that y'all don't know pressure till you're training Ric Flair's son and he walks in and he just comes to the ring, and you either got to know what you're doing as a trainer or Ric Flair is going to stop you. So for him to trust me, James, with his son, I have a picture, like a family portrait back home in my museum. And at one night, it was just a special moment. I have Bobby Eaton's son, Dylan, Ricky Steamboat's son, and Ric Flair's son, all in the ring together. And that was an amazing night for those guys that I love and respect to give me their sons. So I tell you, one of the greatest compliments from Rick for me is years ago, we were on the same show and he was doing a signing right when he first started doing signings, James. And buddy, there were 800 people in line. And my son, my oldest son, had always loved Ric Flair. And I was at my table and my son said, Dad, I'm gonna get in line to meet Rick. And I said, well, son, if you'll just wait, I'll take you later. No, I'm gonna meet him now. So my son got in the back of that line, and James, what bless my heart is Rick, for some reason, saw little George, as I call him, in the line, and he got up and walked and got my son, and he brought my son. I know those people were so mad, but he brought my son all the way to the front of that line. And he said, I'll sign anything for George South's son, but I'm charging everybody else. So we about started a riot. But, you know, just those little things, I'll always remember. Rick didn't have to do that. But here's a story nobody's ever heard, James, real quick. Years ago, Atlanta TV, I got knocked out on TV. Rick Steiner, it was an accident. Well, he said it was an accident, but he knocked me out cold. And so they bring me to the dressing room. They lay me on the floor, James, and I couldn't feel nothing. I mean, I didn't know what was wrong. And as I'm laying there, all I could see was Ric Flair walk by, and he reached down, James, and he put $50 in my hand. I mean, he did. He put $50 in my hand and kept walking. And he never asked for it back. He never said anything about it. But it was just so amazing to me that he cared, okay? And he didn't know if I would need it to get home on. You know, I'm driving in from Charlotte, but I've never forgot that. I never let him forget that. He didn't have to do that. Everybody else just stepped over George, and let's get on with the next match. But he did. He reached down and he put $50 in my hand that if I needed it to get home. So little things like that early on in my career was stuff that I've never forgot. He didn't have to do that.
Well, let's talk about the main event.
Okay, then. The last of four inductees, the Great Mooter. Now, why the Great Mooter? It's not the inductee. Is that right? The inductee? Anyway, whatever. It's not the Great Mooter we're going to be talking about. It is going to be the person who's going to be inducting him, Ric Flair. So,
my friend.
Your good friend Ric Flair. Now, some people might be confused why we're bringing this up now, because there was a sort of a back and forth. This all started when we posted a video a few weeks ago when I was away, and then I didn't have Wi-Fi for a few days, and I looked at my phone and went, that video's done suspiciously well. That seems to be really, really well engaged with the audience. Anyway, Ric Flair saw it, old thin-skinned Ric Flair. Made a big complaint about on Twitter. In fact, I've got the quotes. This on March 11th. Thank God they used the word veteran and didn't call you a legend, you being Dutch. Just a miserable old wrestler trying to make a buck. The blackest of kettles calling the pot black there. Or pot or kettle, whichever way it goes. And by the way, you never had a legacy to begin with. Woo. And then a second one. I just made you more famous than you'll ever be from a single tweet. Woo. I mean, he didn't even know how to make someone famous in a tweet. For starters, you tag the person in it. Or, at least put their name in. So, I'm sure we all read the miserable old wrestler trying to make a book thing, had a good laugh about it as of the deep irony. And then you wrote something. Let me have a look here. It's an enormous portion of Ric Flair's own fans were saying things to him on his Twitter like, put down the bottle, call the nurse to put you to bed, take away the phone for another day and calm down. And everyone who watched our video, who are Dutch Mantell fans, everyone's basically in agreement with you. So, a day later, Dutch, this is a Rick tweeting again. Dutch, let's just agree to hopefully growing old, reluctantly but gracefully, we as old veterans need to be united, not at odds. You responded same day. Earlier tonight, Ric Flair, Nature Boy, sent out a tweet calling for a cessation of words between us. I agree, Mr. Flair. Tons of respect for you. Didn't intend to ruffle your feathers. Love to have you on my podcast to get your side. Take care, sir. Now, that seems like everything's sort of, water under the bridge now. And then it wasn't. On March 13th, you walk it back and double down in a Facebook post on Flair's last match, Flair insulting the fans who paid to see the match. Now, there's a couple more quotes I can go for, but what happened between that tweet, where you sort of back to neutral again, to you being unhappy with Flair?
Well, first of all, I would never said anything at all. It wouldn't even got my attention, really. But he said, hey, you're just a miserable old ex-wrestler or something trying to make a buck. And that is the blackest of kettles, calling another kettle blacker. Now, and I don't know why he singled me out, because Dave Meltzer, and all I was saying was how bad the match was. It was bad. It was terrible. You got a guy who can't go, and I don't know. And I heard that Flair put this match together because they had an agent for it. And I heard it was Road Dogg, but Road Dogg wouldn't let this go because Flair had it in his head that he wanted to do this match this way. And by God, they were going to do it that way, which in retrospect, like that word, retrospect, was a terrible mistake, because I've had people tell me they thought he died in the match. He was his heart was pumping faster than slower, and he was about to pass out. I think by his own admission, he passed out twice in the match, but it was terrible. But he didn't say anything to Meltzer or anything to like the other 100 podcasters or wrestling journalists who critique the match. He said something to me, but a personal attack. So I'm not going to let that go. So yeah, it kind of irked me a little bit, didn't piss me off because I know wrestlers. And Dave Meltzer said I see blood in the water. Well, yeah, people want to hear more about this story. So yeah, it presented itself. So I went after him. And then when he put up, let's let it go. Now he's calling himself a veteran. Let's be like old veterans and let's have peace between us. Yeah. And I said, yeah, I agree. Love you to have you on the podcast and all that. But then I heard privately he's still blasting me. So I let him have it on my Facebook post because there I have room. I can explain all my critique of him and what he's been charged with that I've never been charged with. The sex harassment deal and the paying the taxes and the borrowing the money and I just laid into him. And then all the other fans laid into him. Now, when you're saying that he put his Twitter post up and every word is capitalized, the first letter in it, that's not him. That's his social media manager. Because I don't think Rick could even do that. I really don't. I don't think he's figured out, and I haven't figured it out that well myself. But I know Ric Flair hadn't figured out how to tweet. I don't think. And I wrote him a long Facebook critique of not only him, but his social media manager too. And I said, if you're going to, that old saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And I just ripped him up, and the fans ripped him up too. And then all of a sudden, it just all disappeared. It just floated off into the ether. And I'm glad because, but Ric Flair, he's gonna induct the great Muda. Is that who it?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I never thought I would see Ric Flair back in the WWF anyway. Because he was supposed to go, this is 2 years ago, I think. He was supposed to go to AEW. Then all that plane ride from hell stuff came out on Tales from the Territories, Dark Tales from the Territories. And it stopped that because it makes it pits him in such a bad light. And what pissed me off really more than him attacking me was him attacking fans, calling them MFing idiots. Now listen, these people spent money to see his last match. Thank God it's his last match.
So far.
And then he badmouths them. But without the fans, he would have been nothing. So he owes them everything. He owes me nothing. He can talk to me, but to talk to his own fans that way, and that shows you how much he respects his own fans. Now he didn't even ever take that back either. He didn't say he's sorry. He didn't apologize. He didn't do nothing. He's still Ric Flair. And I mean, I would have, if my fans, all 7 of them, but I would never talk to them in such a way. And I would never disrespect them like that. Because when you're asking somebody to pay money to see you, and then not only do you not perform, do you not live up to what they had anticipated, but then you cuss them out and call them pieces of crap. That's not right. And I attacked him on that. So, but the fans, they got with it. They ripped him a new one. You know, the old joke was, hey, did you see Ric Flair's last match? Did you see Ric Flair's last match? I said, oh God, I hope so. And I put that joke in. That's an old wrestler joke that you tell somebody.
Well, he's obviously not well, I mean, maybe his tweeting. I've never seen anyone else tweet and capitalize every single word. As somebody who's written a book as you have, that's unbelievably annoying. But anyway, I mean, that's the least of it. He's obviously learned to Google, because he seems to be now Googling his own name every day just to see who's criticizing him this week. And, you know, an interview I did a couple of months ago with Shane Douglas, somehow that got into his ear, but he doesn't even seem to watch the videos. He maybe sees like a brief write-up and a couple of quotes on a wrestling news website. He's not actually watching the videos, because on that video, Shane Douglas, for the most part, was actually very nice about him. And then maybe he's got the wrong end of the stick, or, you know, thought it was more of an attack than it was on the video beforehand. But I want to go back to this. So, like, obviously one day you're all buddy, well, not buddy, but you know what I mean, on Twitter, and then the next day you're on Facebook again. So is this some mutual friend who said, hey, Rick's still, no names obviously, but some mutual friend who's getting in touch with you and saying, listen, he's really upset with you over saying this, and he's still saying this, that, and the other?
Who got in charge with me? Who got in touch with me?
Yeah, I'm saying no names, don't give it away. But, I mean, people were getting in touch, a mutual friend, I'm presuming.
Well, it's the wrestler hotline, you know, and I'm sure he was. It's something that said, well, he may have done that there, but he hadn't forgot you. That's all you got to say. So then I ripped into him again. Hey, I never said I'll make peace. What he wanted to do, he wanted to make peace on his terms. Well, that's not how it works. You know, might have been, I actually kind of apologized to him. I said, I didn't mean to ruffle your feathers, which is a kind of apology, but not yet. But he never even came close to that. But see, Ric Flair thinks there's the guy has issues. The guy has a lot of issues that will never be faced, because he's gone too long. Everybody thought he was dead like 3 years ago. And if I looked in the paper or I read something on a wrestling website, Ric Flair dead at 73 or whatever, that would not surprise me. And I don't want to see that. But I don't think it would surprise anyone, because I still think he still thinks he's like 35. Because this is what happens when you get older. Your body gets older, but your brain doesn't. My brain still thinks like I'm 35 or 30 or 25, but my body doesn't. So, and I think that's the issue with Rick right there, because He's still the limousine riding, high flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, whatever he is. And he never got out of that phase. And he's the type who, they say don't believe your own publicity. He is the type who not only believed his own publicity, he thought it was God honest truth. But I've heard stories about Rick, like if anybody else, like if the people in charge of creatives, they wanted to kind of get behind somebody else, well, he would actively work against them to keep them from getting, and I don't have firsthand evidence, but I've heard this for years, that he would do that. So, but he is what he is. You either accept him or you don't accept him, because he's not going to change.
Yeah. I should also point out, how old do you think his liver age is?
Oh my God. There's no telling how old that is. Probably 130, to tell you the truth.
Because I don't know the story. Why did Eddie and Rick have a falling out?
They had problems for years. It started. Maybe it came to a head. Let's put it that way. When Crockett bought UWF, and Eddie was the booker. I'm sure you heard the story about Eddie had his name on a door. Somebody ripped it off, put Rick's name on there. Eddie was talking about these guys that from UWF not working, going on strike. They were going to go to Memphis, a bunch of them. So Eddie and Rick really never saw eye to eye. I liked Eddie.
Eric Bischoff, a couple of years ago on his podcast, said, and I'm going to give you the quote here, "I don't think I've ever met anyone who smoked more weed than Too Cold Scorpio," before saying that you were an amazing, amazing talent. I've heard conflicting reports about why you left WCW. Eric says that you were basically just too over with the weed smoking and it wasn't going to fly in corporate Turner. Is that true?
To tell the truth, this shit, I was always angry and mad and thought that my getting fired from WCW at that time was due to Ric Flair. And that's why I was mad at Ric Flair was going to whoop that motherfucker's ass and shit. You know what I'm saying? But, that's just me and shit. You got a motherfucker problem. You think a motherfucker did it. I should address the problem right then and there instead of waiting 10, 15 years and letting shit build up and then not realizing that, fuck, shit, I was mad and about ready to whoop the wrong motherfucker for the wrong motherfucker reason. And then after hearing Eric on the dark side of the ring on his shoot about, Scorpio being multi-talented, but the fucking big old weed head, I was like, that motherfucker, he was right. I didn't give a fuck, man. I left my fucking weed and shit, man. I was smoking. I didn't give a fuck, man. I used to walk around with a fucking ounce at all motherfucking times. And I was smoking in a car. I was all about hotboxing. Roll up the windows and shit and smoke it out and get all fucked up. Not realizing that shit stays in your clothes and in your hair. You step out, it's like, I'm good. And everybody's like, ooh, he smelled like he just walked out of the dispensary, like for real.
So really, you genuinely only found this out a couple of years ago that Ric Flair really didn't have much to do with it at all?
Right, not at all. This shit, it was me, Eric Bischoff, who had to fire me, and the reason he had to fire me is because I was a fucking weed head. You know what I'm saying? So, and at that time, when you're in a corporate, trying to run a corporate business, if you're smoking a little bit and you're doing it on the down low and shit, they're probably not going to raise too much hell or anything like that shit. But every fucking high spot and everything I fucking got was invented on me being motherfucking high. So, I am not going to take it on some of my best matches because I was higher than three motherfuckers, you know what I'm saying? So, I ain't going to take none of that away, so.
Did you get on board, did you get on with Eric on a personal level, maybe even before when he was just like third string announcer? Did you get on with him as a boss?
I started having more respect for Eric. Eric was always, businessman. He never really came at me the wrong way or sideways or anything like that. So he was always, pretty straightforward and shit, as far as what I know. Me overall, as I started learning more about
his background on martial arts and so forth and stuff like that, that I started having more respect for him. Overall, I didn't really have too much respect for him, not knowing, oh, Eric just coming in, he don't know nothing about the business and shit like that. But, you know, everybody that come in the business basically don't know shit about the business until they learn about the business. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's just, you know, life itself in general. But yeah, you know, that's the way I felt, you know, at that point in time. But no, I never really, you know, per se had any problems and stuff. You know, it was just that learning and growing process of, you know, boy in a man's world, becoming a man, you know, over a period of time, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, becoming a man is being able to talk to somebody if you got problems or issue, address that motherfucker and deal with it. It's not, you know, instead of just want to, you know, always want to jump to conclusions. You want, you know, hey, I'm just gonna whoop the motherfucker's ass. You know, fuck it, win, lose, or draw. You know, it is what it is. You know, so but at the end of the day, we still gotta work together. So you know, no love lost, but let's squash this shit. But no, it was never nothing like that and stuff. It was just me learning more about a person himself and his background. A lot of times when a person's in an office or in a position, you look at them as that boss or in that position, not really knowing nothing about their personal life or what else they're involved or what else they're into, you know, besides, you know, everybody got something going on besides wrestling, but a lot of people just don't know about it.
We're going to move on, and I hate to say this is the low-hanging fruit section, as we called it last time. But I'm going to ask a question about Ric Flair, but it's not going to be what he was. I want to make mention here now that Dick Flair, I think you referred to him as one time. the last video that you did on him for this channel, I just had a look. 116,000 people watched it.
Yeah.
So that was quite.
Is that good, bad?
What, 6 figures? I'd for one clip, I'd say that's pretty darn good. Ric Flair responded. And just typical Ric Flair, you know what he's going to say. He obviously didn't watch your video. He watched the first 4 seconds and then made up his mind as what is that. Anyway, his video did a lot worse. But I'm not going to ask about that. I'm going to ask you about when you first came up with the idea to do the inter-promotional Shane Douglas, Ric Flair, ECW versus WCW matches. How, from conception to when it was almost a reality, how many weeks or months was there?
Yeah, it came that close. It was probably months. It was probably wishful thinking in my head. But again, my differences with him aside, I've always been a mark for his work, right? He's a great in-ring performer, or was. And, you know, watching, the reason the franchise character started doing that was, you know, Paul had said, I had that first 5-minute promo. At the first time of the franchise, 5-minute promo. I hadn't fleshed the character out, didn't really know what the character was going to be. And all day long, I keep asking him, what do you want me to say? What do you think? He said, well, I'll get with you. I'm thinking, literally, my music is playing in the ring. I've never done a 5-minute promo. That's a long promo, and for anybody. And my music's playing. I went, Paul, what do you want me to say? He went, whatever you want. And it threw me for about a second. And I thought, I got this. So being in Philadelphia, I was well aware because it was a mark for Ric's work. You know, Charlotte, of course, he was a god, right? Could walk on water in Charlotte. But Chicago and Philadelphia weren't far behind. Those two towns, like, he was right there, you know, like really, really idolized. And so I thought, let's say something about it. If Paul wanted me to be the new 60-minute man and the updated version of him, at one point, Paul had floated the idea of me doing his woo and his chop. So you out of your fucking mind? I'm out here burying the guy and then I'm going to copy him. So, you know, I went out and part of my shtick then was to bury Flair, thinking burying Flair in Philadelphia is going to get heat on me. And instead, the next time I come, if people hold up signs, Flair is dead, franchise new 60-minute man, stuff like that, almost turning me face. Like, no, not what I'm looking for, right? Now, how that translated when I told Flair that story. Flair tried to say I tried to put all the heat on Paul, and then I told him that it was all made up and that I was not trying to, you know, like, dude, that is not what I said. I looked him in the eye and said, here's why I said these things. And so when this starts to happen, and after several months of doing these promos, and it was clear that he was not coming, Arn had come in for a show. Paul would always threaten WCW lawsuits, and we'd get. That's how we got Pillman. That's how we got Sherry originally. That's how we got Arn, Bobby,
Mick as well. I mean, Mick came around that time, didn't he?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And Arn had come in, and when he walked into the building, Arn and I have always gotten along great. By the way, heartbreaks. Arn, so sorry for your brother with Brock's passing. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. But he, Double A is such a good guy and a phenomenal wrestler and teacher. He had come and it was almost like he had something like to tell, and he grabbed, looked at me and waved me over, went to get to Paul and huddled us into a room and closed the door and being like, what's going on? And he started talking to Paul first, and I'm half listening, half paying attention. I'm thinking about my match that night. And he said, Nate wants to know if he can trust Shane in the ring. And that's what caught my attention. And I looked at him, like, why do you ask? And he said, well, this is when he's having his trouble with Bischoff and coming up with a contract, and was floating the idea of us bringing him in. And I don't know, he and Paul talked privately also. I don't know, wasn't privy to the conversation as to all what was Rick sending through this message. But it was like $100,000 or $150,000, some number that we couldn't afford to pay. And so right there on the cuff, I came up with the idea. I said, well, why don't we do a series of 3 matches? And to show Rick that I'll do business, first match will be in Charlotte. 55 minutes, I'll do the favor for him. Second match in Pittsburgh, same thing, 6 minutes, we'll slide me over. Now it's 1-1. Now we have to have the rubber match, Philadelphia. And I told Paul, we'll run the Spectrum. This will be our first pay-per-view. And give him, I think like at that time I said, give him 10% of the gate and the buy, whatever that would have been. And that was pretty much where the conversation was left. And lickety split, like that week or within the next week or two, we hear that he'd re-signed with WCW. And Paul wanted me to continue hitting Flair in these promos. And I said, look, Paul, it's almost pathetic now. We know he's not coming. Prior to that, there was still maybe a questionable chance. But after that, we knew he wasn't coming. It was sort of looking pathetic, like the old Vince McMahon thing that I agree with to a tiny degree. Don't talk about the other companies because you're giving them time, right? Now, ECW was different because we were the small guy trying to make our bones. But it was clear that he wasn't coming. And so it sort of looks like, like me going out and say shooting on Bruno. He's retired. Like, why, it's going to get you some heat, and then it's going to be like, okay, why? And Paul wanted me to keep doing that. And for a while after I did do that, like would throw him in here and there, like the Dick promo. But it really dissipated after that. I started segueing the character to other places, focus more on our people than Ric Flair. But it came close. I don't know how close from the time that Arn left that building, if maybe this was just, Flair yanking our chain and trying to make WCW nervous. But in some short period after, the idea was gone.
Yeah, as you said, he re-signed with WCW. In my mind, it was always a cross-promotion with ECW and WCW, but that wasn't the case. ECW was actually going to bring Flair in for a short time.
Yes, yeah, for the 3 shots. And then, my hope was, I guess somewhere in the back of my head was, once we get, I was always calling in my promos, and because I believed that once we got to pay-per-view, that was sort of the nirvana. Right, that was us getting to the promised land, and that at that point we would grow much bigger and faster. I still think then, I still think now, like I thought then, that whether it was in WCW later or in ECW then, the fans all knew that Shane Douglas and Flair really had legitimate heat, and if Flair had come in and done business, that we could have at that time helped WCW turn things around, because he could still go in the ring at that time. I was pretty much at the top of my game at that time, and because of the legitimacy of it. And that's pretty much what Bischoff had said. I want to be the one that gets to bring this to TV. We tried in ECW and failed. Tried it. Bischoff tried. What surprises me is that Bischoff wasn't keen enough to see as soon as he started the politicking, which was literally the first day I was in there with him. That he didn't know what Flair was up to, that he was in some way sloughing off this angle that was, in my mind, meant to help start turning the corner. And he started burying from the very beginning.
It's one of those things where you can do, I can do like an 8-hour flight and get off the plane and feel fine, or I can do a 1.5-hour flight and feel like death. It's just, I don't know if it's just the altitude or whatever, but I recovered. Flying. You've got no sympathy for me. How many flights did you catch over your career?
Not many lately.
No, not many lately, but I mean, how many, like between like Florida and the WWF, you must have done like 1,000.
Yeah, WWF was the one.
Hmm.
That's the one that jaded you for all travel, all trips. It was, up at 6, airport at 7, flight, gym, hotel, repeat cycle, again, night after night. Unless you be lucky, you're in a town where you rent a car and you're kind of satelliting for a couple of days, driving back and forth in and out of LA or Detroit or Chicago or one of those metropolitan areas like that, where you can kind of, where you can settle down and then move on. But other than that, it's just a plane every day.
Were you somebody who could sleep on flights easily?
Not for the first 20 minutes. I could, first 20, 30 minutes, I could sit there and I can probably still now. I could nod out and then I was good. Then I was up and really about all I needed.
I'm trying to think. What was, because I mean, like for long flights for me, I'm always on the Valium. What was the sleeping drug of choice for everybody trying to get some sleep on a long haul flight?
Oh God, those are halcyons.
Oh right, so you'll sleep
days.
for like 24 hours then?
No, up in a halcyon, they had everything. The doctor, when the doctor from Pennsylvania was around, it was halcyon, Valium, and what were the red thing, Placidils. And they're not. I don't know if they're I think classified a hypnotic. And I don't know, and probably other, then other ones would enter into the picture eventually, But those are the basics in those times.
Yeah. That's got to be the hardest thing. I mean, it's not the bumps and everything. It's got to be just the travel's just got to just killed you.
Well, being away from home, no home life, no centralized, no basis really until you get home. And you're trying to hold it down on both fronts, keep your mind, keep a business, keep a business attitude, in your working business. That's why people ask questions. They don't even remember the last couple of years of the business because you're traveling. I guess that was Vince's his theory that you keep them moving, you keep them so busy they don't have time to think. Because I see a lot of questions and stuff about angles. Did I know about Valentine? Did I know about if I knew about it, it was something that just passed through, went through in one ear and went out the other until you actually did it. It wasn't. It was just a rumor.
Mm.
It wasn't actually taking place until something actually happened.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys cope with it. I mean, I know how a lot of people try to cope with it, but I just, for long term, I don't know how anyone sort of, could manage to cope with it just being on the road all the time, unless you were like Ric Flair and you just couldn't cope with home life at all.
Yeah. Some guys like that. He's above and beyond. He's still going. You got to give him credit. I mean, he drives to be. He loves that that spotlight that he's in. He loves that persona. Ric Flair, 1 hour man. This, it's just, he's just, and he worked. Like I said, he used to bust his ass to get back to Atlanta TV because Atlanta was the hub for, TBS and going all over and he worked, like even sportscasters and people know him now a lot as well as the WWF, but he brought himself into prominence before WWF. And it's an old Freddie Blassie. It's what Freddie Blassie drilled into young guys that would listen to him. He says, get on your promo and repeat your name. Mention, make your name a household word. Don Muraco, Magnificent Muraco, Magnificent, or classy Freddie, but at the end, people will respond to your it's a subliminal, more than subliminal. You're slamming
Overt.
over the you're slamming over the head with it. But it's it makes sense. You only have so much time on the promos. The average, well, now it's kind of different. It's way different.
You know that Ric Flair, he released a video maybe a week or so ago about him running around the ring and taking slams and everything at 70-something years old. That must give you the idea that you could have one more run.
No. No. I'm not running around. God bless him, He wants to do that to himself. And he had that whole heart thing, that whole health thing about a year or two ago. It's just a couple years ago, right?
Yeah. I've got a feeling that this might be something to do with the idea why he's divorced for the 5th time as well. Is that I just think he just wants to just be Ric Flair, the character, 24/7.
Yeah.
He can't let it go.
He kind of lost. I think he lost it when, losing a son or a child, I think is probably, maybe the hardest thing anybody can go through, and I guess he had 2 sons.
David and Reed, yeah. And Reed's the youngest one who
Is that the one that passed away?
Yeah.
I guess, I think he went, that's when he went on, and I guess he seems like he's kind of come back, a little bit after that, but he's just he's lost himself in Ric Flair persona now.
Yeah, maybe that's where he's happiest.
Yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
If it works for you, what the hell.